Hope sent a quiver. Written by OrionLady on AO3. Read by Alextras. Chapter 22. 10 waffles remained stacked on the glass pan after being removed from the grill. Chocolate chip riddled, steaming, fluffy, perfect. 10! Unheard of in the Barton household. Most times Clint had barely managed to get one off the grill before Lagardemayne's fingers snatched it up. He glanced over his shoulder again at the empty table. Also unheard of for 7:30 on the Monday morning. Laura ambled around the porch, straightening toppled blankets and furniture and untwisting wind chimes from stronger squalls in the night. "Hey, Dad!" Nate scurried into the kitchen. He spotted the plate beside Clint's elbow at the counter. "Are you having waffles? Cool!" Finally, an actual child. Clint nuzzled the boy's head with his knuckles. "Where is everybody? We have to leave for school soon." "Sleepin'." "Sleeping? Still?" Clint watched his son stand on tiptoes to peer at the plate and then tear off a piece from the bottom waffle. "Mm-hmm. Lion Cooper stayed up late talking, Daddy." "I sent them to bed after midnight." "Heard him whispering after that, too." Figures. Knowing Lila, she snuck back into Cooper's room and sat in the desk chair like Clint always did, debriefing with each other in their usual habit. "We had an exciting night, huh?" A signal flare powder bombed into Clint's chest whenever he so much as pictured Peter's shocked and touched face the moment Maria told him he had his virtual identity back. Nate tipped his head back to meet Clint's eyes. "Petey really gets to stay? Forever?" "Yeah, bud." Clint kissed his forehead. "Forever and ever. We adopted him." Nathaniel chirped and grabbed another waffle, stuffing half in his mouth around his cheers. Clint chuckled. "Careful there, champ." He tore off the other half so Nate didn't choke and handed it to him. "How about you go wake our sleepy teens for school? I'll finish breakfast." "Okay, I'll get him." Nate ran off, a whiz of clumsy coordination who bumped into the doorframe on his way by. Clint shook his head. "Slow down, bud. Use your inside feet." "I am." He did, in the boys' version of slowing down, meant going from a dead sprint to a light run. Clint groaned about ragamuffin children, belied by his smile. He chopped up bananas and strawberries for fruit salad while imagining all the things he could do for Peter now that it was official. Places they could take him, stuff to buy for his room, extended family to meet. Only once Clint switched off the burner did he note the continued quiet. "Nate?" A faint giggle answered, up the stairs. Clint followed it and was relieved to note the sound of Lila in the bathroom and Cooper mumbling over homework in his room. Sluggish but efficient, they'd be ready in time to catch the bus. The human alarm clock had done his job to a T. So where was the laughter coming from? Clint tracked it to the room across from he and Laura. He halted in the doorway. "Nathaniel, Peter isn't even going to school. I meant roll call the others." "I did!" Nate, on his knees on Peter's bed, bounced again. Peter's limbs spaghetti wobbled. "But you said Peter can't skip meals." Drat. Clint did say that, loudly, when Peter tried to get out of finishing his ravioli last night. Peter was still under the covers and bleary-eyed, but he waved at Clint with a mellow grin. "Morning." "Sorry, Pete." Clint put both hands on his hips and leveled a stern look at Nate. "He wasn't supposed to wake you." "It's all right. It's fun, actually. And I heard you cooking downstairs anyway." Clint snorted. A kid jumping up and down on the bed when he was barely awake was fun. Yeah, sure. Peter endured the hullabaloo with a delighted face and jaw-breaking yawn. Nate rambled on about his favourite topic, barely winded. "And Nellie's bed will be even bigger once we fix it up this summer, and the ramp will have rubber instead of wood for their talons, and we're going to paint the coop fence with red stripes this time because it'll scare away predators." "Predators," Clint corrected, leaning on the doorframe. "And for the last time, we can't paint the chicken coop fence to look like a candy cane." "But Cooper said it helps keep foxes away." "Well, Cooper was wrong." Nate fell back on the bed in dramatic fashion, stunned to hear his big brother could possibly be wrong about something. This put him right across Peter's shins, and yet still the teen smiled. "I could get used to this," said Peter. "You're gonna have to," Clint warned, "because, as I'm sure you've noticed, this is pretty tame for the amount of noise the kids make in the morning." "You make that sound like a bad thing." Smothering a bright grin, Clint flattened his palm over Peter's forehead. "You, an American teenage boy, don't want to sleep into ungodly hours. Should I check for a fever?" Peter laughed and batted Clint's hand when it fumbled over his eyes. "I'm in a good mood. Sue me." "Only if your settlement payment is in waffles, because I plan to start eating them all before someone else does." Peter just shrugged, wiping sleep from his eyes, but Nate patted all over the teen's knees, a wriggly worm of a kindergartner.
"Hurry, Pete, we gotta get some before Lila and Cooper do."
Clint knocked on the doorframe on his way out, after one last look at Peter. The boy caught it and flushed, but his gaze was steady, unlike Clint's knees. Something bubbled over in Peter's eyes, an infant skiff of joy across the desert inside him, one they'd been watering in each other ever since Clint found him.
"Morning, Dad."
Lila's usual energy allowed her an extra measure of perkiness, even after a late night. She hopped out of the bathroom and down the stairs. Her hair was done up in a crown braid.
"Waffles?"
"On the stove. Watch the pan, it's hot." Cooper dragged himself by with a quite intelligible by Cooper's standards. "Good morning to you too," Clint replied, messing up his neatly combed hair. Cooper swatted away his father's hands just as easily as Peter had. "Maybe ditch the sweater vest this morning. It's supposed to get up to the high 70s later." "Mm-hmm," Cooper grunted. He nearly ran into a banister on his way down. Lila steered him around a spare shoe before he tripped. About to follow his kids, Clint paused as Nate's quieter voice from inside Peter's bedroom.
"Will you help me with my reading later?"
A shuffle. Pete's voice was warm. "I'd love to. I used to read to, well, a little girl a few years back."
"Oh, and we have to finish Mr. Cosmo's Adventures on Mars."
"But of course." Another shuffle, cloth on skin, like Peter was putting on socks. "We can't leave Mr. Cosmo stuck on the moon now, can we?"
"No!"
The pitter-patter of Nate's bare feet rounded something, probably the bed. Then they suddenly slowed.
"Hey, Peter?
"Hmm?"
Do you really have no mum or dad?"
Clint's spine fused like a lightning rod. He turned, ready to dart into the room and rescue Peter from this conversation. Just his luck, no-filter Nate would be the one still curious after last night's show and share. But something calm in Peter's voice stayed Clint's feet, kept him from this eavesdropping habit he'd never kicked after retirement. "No, I don't. They died a long time ago, when I was a little older than you are now."
"They did?"
"In a plane crash. But I don't remember them much. My aunt and uncle raised me." A silence. Dresser jaws thumped closed and Nate's feet trailed Peter's longest strides around the room. This gentle timpani section led Clint to lean on the wall, hidden just out of sight. These kids. His kids. He'd be able to legally say it by 9 a.m. this morning, once Hill filed the adoption papers to CPS. Fierce, familiar pressure squeezed in Clint's ribcage, the burning need to protect these innocents under his charge with every atom of his body. Then Nate hummed.
"I guess Mum and Dad are your parents now, huh?"
A misstep echoed, and Peter exhaled a noisy breath through his nose. The hint of a smile filtered into his voice, however, soft as it was. "Yeah, I guess they are. I don't totally understand why they want me, but I'm glad they do."
"Good."
A resolute, satisfied note entered Nate's tone.
"Nobody else would take care of Spiderman, right?"
Peter huffed.
"Daddy's fought aliens, so he knows superpowers."
Nate's voice grew in volume as they reached the door and drew up beside Clint, who managed to still his shaky lips before they had appeared. Peter now wore his hoodie and fluffy slipper socks.
Plus, he can probably beat even you at skipping rocks.
Peter froze in time with Clint. Skipping rocks?
Yeah, like you did with Cooper at the lake.
Nate threw Peter a funny look, as if this should have been obvious.
Remember? When everyone wore black for Iron Man.
Clint and Peter met each other's eyes in a zap of sheer awe. They'd agreed not to tell the kids about the memory wipe, or having talked with him before he came to live here, worried it would both complicate matters and confuse them more, since they'd only met him once and hadn't formed close bonds with him. Or so they'd thought. Right. Peter accepted Nate's hand when it slipped into his own. Nate swung their arms. Well, everyone needs a parent to keep them humble, even Spiderman. I'd whoop you at rock skipping, said Clint, though Peter gave him a knowing smile at his hoarse tone. Show you amateurs how it's done. Nate clasped Clint's hands too.
Come on, Daddy. Lila and Cooper always eat the best waffles.
Best waffles? Asked Peter. He had to turn sideways to fit down the stairs, since Nate linked them in a long chain.
The ones with all the chocolate chips in them.
Ah. Lila and Cooper had indeed claimed most of the best waffles, but a few remained, on the platter that were packed to brimming with chocolate chips. They wolfed them from their usual seats at the table, slathered in maple syrup, Laura, Nutella, Lila, and raspberry jam, Cooper, timeless soul that he was, respectively.
Oh, I want syrup. I want some.
Nate began the arduous task of climbing his chair. Peter, passing with a spare plate, set it down to lift the boy past the tall chair's legs and into his booster seat.
Thanks.
No problem. Lila kicked out a chair for Peter, between her and Laura. Peter nodded his thanks and also proceeded to bathe his measly 2 waffles in syrup. Teens. Clint tossed 2 more onto his plate when he wasn't looking. Hey! Eat as much as you can. Clint jabbed a finger at the waffles and, miraculously, Peter did as asked. A smile still lingered in the corners of his mouth. Laura stood to retrieve paper towels for Nate's massacre of the waffles and pecked Peter's forehead on the way by. Morning, Nate. Morning, Peter. Peter hid a blush under the guise of slicing up his waffles. Morning. Clint laid out the bowl of fruit salad and took his own seat next to Nate, privately marvelling at the homey sounds of clattered cutlery, Nate telling Lila about a book he read where tree houses can go places and asking if theirs could.
We'll have to find out, Nate, man.
And Peter humming along in amusement, the low murmur that represented home. Clint never understood how people slighted the domestic scenes when they were safe and full of love like this. Maybe not so private after all. Laura winked at Clint. He just rested an arm across the back of her chair, full even though he hadn't eaten much yet. Then Peter leaned over the table and glanced at the fruit salad bowl. He squinted, eyes drifting from it to the counter to Lila's plate. He pointed at it. I'll give you $20 for that banana. It's the last one. You don't have $20. I'll rosin your bow for a week. Lila sized him up. I don't know if I want the banana anyway. Rock, paper, scissors, you for it? Peter held out his palm. Oh, you're on. No freaky powers to help you. How would powers help me at rock, paper, scissors? It's all guesswork. Dad says you can read people's micro-expressions and tell what they might choose. Peter quirked a brow at Clint. Then that's his superpower, not mine. Lila too held out her hand and matched the rhythm of his fist taps. Ready? Rock, paper, scissors. Drat! Peter snipped her paper hand with his scissor fingers and accepted the unopened banana she chucked onto his plate amid much faux grumbling. She even planted a hand over Peter's face and shoved it away, a gentler version of how she and Cooper messed with each other. Peter snipped at that too until she pulled back, both teens snorting. This revealed Peter's beaming face, so far removed from that scared boy in the woods. Much obliged. Thank you. All right, campers. Laura began to gather up plates. It's my turn to drive you to the bus stop. Wash your hands and brush your teeth, or Mama Taxi is leaving without you. Nate and the teens trotted off while Peter peeled his banana, enjoying it in quick squirrel-like bites, all bulging cheeks. Bananas were the only food he ever ate that way. Clint added them to the grocery list for tomorrow's trip and noted that they'd need a consistent stock with Peter in the house now. Maybe they could even buy fixings for Tai Lab, a celebration supper. Clint was still planning out the meal in his head when a strange movement in the hallway caught his eye. Lila and Cooper tugged on their shoes as normal, zipped backpacks as normal, followed Laura to the door as normal, even waved goodbye to Nate, washing his hands as normal. But then they just stopped moving. Teenagers to marble statues on a dime. Guys, Laura backtracked. We're already running late. We gotta go before... She trailed off when she caught sight of the teens head-on. Their eyes were big and round, all for a bewildered Peter, and something of last night's wonder seeped back into both of their expressions. Cooper stepped forward, but couldn't seem to get his voice working. The air between the three teens hummed. Lila spoke first, her tone plaintive. You'll still be here when we get back? Oh, yeah. Peter's surprise melted away under a more confident nod. He swallowed around the last of the banana. Yeah, I will. I'm just going to help Clint around the farm today, so I might be out in the yard when you get home. No, I mean... Lila's brow furrowed. Cooper shook his head. We can't come home to find you gone, living in the woods. You can't leave like you did before. Going through everything without you it'd be awful. Like you did before. Clint tried to catch Peter's eye, but the boy was too busy staring at Cooper and Lila in dawning realization. Laura's jaw went lax, struck by the truth of it too. Maybe Nate's not the only one feeling the pull of those memories, even if they don't understand the feeling. I promise, said Peter, his voice firm. I'm not running away ever again. You're my family. Lila surged forward before he even finished. Her backpack dropped to the floor, freeing up her arms to throw them around Peter when he stood from the table. Much like Maria yesterday, Peter's arms patted the air. He inhaled a car on speed bump's breath before his eyes closed and he loosely wrapped Lila in a return embrace, hands pressed to her back. The same height, their shoulders and chins tucked together perfectly. Cooper circled their orbit slower than Lila had, though once he got the two of them in his arms, he squeezed both tightly. His forehead came to rest on Peter's, pin-straight auburn locks on chestnut curls, tangled together. Nate waddled over to hug Lila and Peter's legs, one under each arm. I promise, Peter whispered into Lila's shoulder. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Cooper was the first to crack, just a sniffle, but the relief on all their faces pulled a deep cathartic sigh from Clint's chest, like he released the months of hurt and anger and fear all in one fell pop. Laura's hand flew to her mouth, eyes tender on the scene. I did it for this. Clint's own words to Peter that night, what felt like a lifetime ago, drifted back through his thoughts. I did it for my kids. All four of them. The teens ended up being an hour late to school for the first time in years. Laura happily wrote them a note. I have a green sock and a white sock. They get eaten every time we do a load, I swear. Here. Laura rooted around the mess of clothing, piping hot from the dryer. I just saw that pesky green sock a second ago. Aha! She held out Nathaniel's tiny lime-coloured sock, and Clint balled it up to add to the boys' pile. The washer and dryer lids held a stack for each child, oldest to youngest. Laura finished folding the last of Peter's science shirts, the few they didn't have the heart to throw out at least. Clint grimaced to see his small pile compared to their other kids. Laura noticed his eyeline. I'm going into town tomorrow to buy him more clothes, warm clothes. Maybe his own jacket that actually fits. He shivers a lot. I'm curious what the shield doctor will say about him at the next week's assessment. Anemic, probably. Low blood sugar levels, too. Laura moved on to Cooper's checkered shirt collection, folding them into a neat tower. She held up a blue and black one that Peter had borrowed from Cooper and blinked fast. Did you think we'd ever end up here, looking back on it? Clint finished folding Nate's tiny pajamas. Where's here? Raising 4 kids, one of whom can stop a minivan with his bare hands. I figured we'd be on our 6th or 7th by now. Is that so? Laura swatted Clint's backside with Lila's maroon softball jersey. Still a charmer. Clint snuck a kiss on her cheek. That's not a no. Not too late to try for a 5th. Laura pretended to shove him off, and yet leaned into it as his lips trailed down her neck. She'd just opened her mouth to banter back when a shriek shattered the afternoon stillness. They both jumped. Adrenal sweat sprang into Clint's palms. Laura's eyes went wide. Aren't the kids hanging out in the treehouse? They're supposed to be. Clint jogged out into the hall, tailed closely by his wife. When I left, they were midway through a game of Trivial Pursuit, and... Another shriek, this one joined by low screams, even the occasional coughing sound. Clint's jog ramped up to a sprint, and he slammed open the screen door without even bothering to put on shoes. Laura snagged a soccer trophy off a nearby shelf. She brandished the sharp, starry, pointed top at Clint's side, stance ready. They both blinked at a lanky figure weaving around the grass. Closing the distance, Peter raced in from the field, smiling? I'm outnumbered, Peter shrieked it. He also coughed and spluttered, body not quite up for this much cardio. They're gonna get me. I'm the last one left. Clint peered past him to see Cooper, Lila, and Nate with their arms outstretched, yelling, "You can run, but you can't hide, and join us." Statements that had Peter losing his breath to giggles just as much as exertion. More like hide, but not run, at the rate Peter was going. Or rather, not going. He lost steam even from the minute or 2 of exercise, his strength not up to par with the Bartons. Cheeks magenta red. Windswept curls framed his eyes. He had to stop at one point and lean over his knees. Cooper took the lead, Lila at his heels. Nate did surprisingly well for his stubby legs, only a few feet behind his siblings. His tongue lolled in cartoon monster fashion, and he giggled like mad. "We're playing zombie tag," he hollered, spotting their parents, which meant they'd all been touched or tagged except for Peter. Shocking with his poor health, really. Beside Clint, Laura started to chuckle and lowered the trophy. At first, Peter's mad dash towards the house seemed to be a last-ditch effort to reach Clint and Laura, and therefore a safe zone. But as usual, Peter never did anything the way they expected. He headed straight for the porch to shimmy up the nearest wooden post until he clung upside down to the underside of the roof. Cooper got there barely a second after Peter and has strained his arms reaching. "So not fair. That's cheating."
No sticky powers,
Lila objected.
Petey, you can't stay up there forever.
Peter playfully stuck out his tongue. "I'll come down if you declare me the winner. I made it to the porch without being tagged." Cooper tried to climb the smooth wooden post and slid back down. "Superpowers don't count."
"And the rule was to make it inside the house to the kitchen,"
said Lila.
"which you never would have with Cooper so close."
The 3 kids jumped up and down trying to tag him, just a few inches too high to grasp, and Peter threw his head back and laughed over the juvenile noise of it all. Carefree and gusty and so very Peter Parker, the way he used to be before life fell apart. Laura laughed along, and Clint simply tried to memorize this moment. "Quick!" Cooper pointed to Lila. "Grab that ball hockey stick over there." Peter groaned. "Ah, come on, you're not seriously going to." Lila poked his back with the blunt end of the stick. Peter mock gasped over the top like a dying Shakespearean actor. "Clint, you gotta save me here. I'll become a zombie." Clint, lips twitching in a grin, turned to Laura. "Did you hear something?" "No, did you?" "Must have been the wind." "Clint!" Clint offered Laura his arm. "Coffee break?" "I'd love one. It's a date." Laura linked his elbow and they walked back inside with the sound of their children's laughter still filling up the house. Thursday game night, for the first time since Natasha's death, housed 6 people around the table. They picked Clue, an old favourite, and one that Peter apparently hadn't played since he was a small child, before he lived with his aunt and uncle. Cooper somehow managed to beat Clint, also a massive first that had Lila cheering in triumph. Colonel Mustard with the revolver in the study. Cooper smirked. Pay up, Dad. Clint threw his cards down. No way you figured that out before me. Cooper, already hoarding the mini chocolate bar stash with his arms, fist bumped Peter and distributed his loot evenly between the two of them. Dad's scary good at this, and we haven't beat him at Clue in over a year. Thanks for the help. Clint squawked in outrage. You guys teamed up against me? You can't do that. There's nothing in the rules against alliances, dear, said Laura, sweet as sugar. Clint cast her a deadpan look that had both Lila and Laura cackling into their hot chocolate. One game turned into 2, which turned into 3, which somehow stretched on to 5 when no one wanted to go to bed. Clint finally threw in his cards when all 4 kids teamed up against he and Laura to beat them silly and steal all their candy. They skipped the usual movie in favour of an early tuck-in, with the last of the dreaded exams tomorrow. Clint poked his head into his daughter's room first. Night, Lila. Or should I call you Nancy Drew with the way you guys solved that last game in 5 minutes?
Very funny.
Don't stay up too late.
I won't.
Lila laid on her stomach at the foot of the bed in front of her worn notebook, legs in the air, muttering Spanish conjugations under her breath.
I just want to go over a few more vocab words before tomorrow.
He'll do fine. Got nothing to worry about. You and Cooper speaking together for a month has paid off.
You really think so?
Clint kissed her forehead before shutting the door. Seguro.
Gracias, Dad. Buenas noches.
Clint smiled. Sweet dreams, Bug. A quick peek in Nathaniel's room revealed Laura snuggled up beside him, reading another Mo Willems book, her fingers flying through the air as she exaggerated each character's voice, ever the hand-talker. Nate giggled when she did Piggy's snort, a stuffed panda cuddled under one arm. Clint soaked in the scene for a few minutes, a pulsating in his chest he hadn't felt since he was young. Much younger than he was now, like a tender stalk of vegetation growing out of a desert. Family. It felt like the first time Laura had told Clint she was pregnant, the reality that their home would increase with a new life. Countless nights he'd dreamt about this, on the prowl in places like Japan and Mexico, killing people to cope with the loss of it all. He'd lay there under a bridge's steel girder, sword under his arm like a panda was under Nate's, and imagine the chance to be surrounded by people who loved him once more. Dad? The object of that older memory drew Clint out of it. He turned to see Cooper at the door of his room across the hall, brow creased. Yeah, Coop, what's up? The teen fidgeted on his bare feet, plaid pants a few inches above the ball joint of his ankle, courtesy of yet another growth spurt. It's Peter. Clint shut Nate's door. What about him? We were hanging out, right? He was designing a new character with me at the desk. Then, when I came back from the bathroom... Clint waited, but Cooper didn't elaborate. Clint glided across the hall so as not to alert Lila next door. Cooper circled his arm. I think you'd better just come see, Dad. Clint followed Cooper into his room, eyes in a trained zigzag to assess the situation. Peter's new hoodie across the back of the swivel chair. 2 cans of soda water opened by the model render screen. Some sort of wolf-scorpion hybrid monster today. And that strange hobby they both shared now. Window slid open all the way. Why is the window open? Where's the screen for it? Clint locked on to that anomaly at once. Faint night breezes fluttered the adjacent curtains. Cooper's eyes clouded. It wasn't when I left for the bathroom. Dad, he's out on the roof. Clint bolted to the window and leaned out as far as he could reach without tipping. The screen was neatly propped against the sill on the other side. Cooper crowded at his back to look. And there, sitting on the eave, knees drawn to his chest, was Peter, barely 4 feet from the edge and a 2-story drop-off. I get that he's super sticky and everything, and he doesn't seem upset, but... No, you were right to tell me. Clint croaked it out. He shook his head to set it back on straight, to hopefully settle the manic thump inside his ears. I'll take care of this. Thanks, Coop. You can get ready for bed, and I'll make sure he's okay. Cooper didn't budge. How will you get back inside? Through your window with Pete, but you stay here, got it? I have better footing on an angle like this. Okay. And oh, how much simpler things would be if Peter had this same reaction to danger. Cooper's brows cleared, eyes soft. Pete's my new brother. Clint's throat tightened. Yeah, he is. I don't want to lose him right after we found him. Clint palmed his eldest cheek. Or not his eldest anymore. We won't lose him. He's here to stay, and I'm making sure of it. At these words, Cooper finally stepped back and nodded. Clint nodded in return, waiting for Cooper to crawl under the covers and turn out the light. Only then did Clint stick his head out the window again. Peter, buddy, it's just me. I'm coming out. Peter didn't turn at the voice, but his eyes were tranquil on the dark sky above, so Clint hopped onto the shingles and into a bent-kneed stance. Grateful for his stocks that mitigated the risk of startling the boy, Clint padded his way around the eaves. At 9 p.m. the shingles radiated tepid heat, warmed by the day's cloudless sunshine but cooling thanks to a moonless sky. Peter's nose twitched. Clint paused, studying his youthful face as best he could in the dim. And abruptly, something in his gut relaxed too. Subliminal instinct confirmed this wasn't a dangerous stunt or action on Peter's part. You do your best thinking from a high perch, huh? Old habits? Peter nodded. Sorry I don't have any skyscrapers to offer you. I like this better, actually. Affection for him throbbed in Clint's chest, warmth rushing through his whole body like Natasha's frozen yogurt tub. How did I ever live without you, Parker? How could we have walked away from you in Germany, tried to hurt you? The very thought stung his eyes now. If he could go back in time to that day, he'd sucker punch some sense into himself. Clint crawled out there with every intention of sitting beside Peter, like that night on the steps after Randy scared them. Close enough to maybe wrap an arm around Peter or hold him back from the edge, not that he needed to, but still give the kid his space. Clint abandoned that plan the moment Peter glanced up at him. His gaze was trusting, the stars reflected in his irises. Hey. Clint climbed in behind Peter, his own knees up bracketing the boy on each side. Both arms looped around Peter's stomach to tuck him back against his chest. He rumbled low so Peter could feel and hear the sotto voce, words in equal measure. Hey, Peter. I'm here. I'm right here. Peter's knees knocked against the insides of Clint's when the motion jostled him a bit. He didn't fight Clint's full body howled, or the lips that pressed to the back of his curly head. Clammy fingers slid from the back of his knees to grasp at Clint's wrists. One hand held the arc reactor keychain, though it was turned off. Hey, Peter whispered back. He didn't sound distressed. No tears or trembling, no pale skin to match bloodshot eyes. No. Peter just kept his gaze fixed upwards. One side of his lips had even quirked up in a faint smile. I grew up in an apartment building in Queens. Even on the roof, we didn't see stars like this. Clint, too, looked high at the explosion of stars, tributaries off the Milky Way that fanned in white and green and orange coronas. How easy it was to take that for granted. He'd certainly started to. Peter leaned back into Clint's arms, right temple against his bicep. Do you remember going into space? Clint rested his chin on the boy's left shoulder. He lulled his own breaths to feel Peter take deep, even inhales that pushed his stomach and arms. He'd never take those for granted either. Yeah, I do. Too much some days. I thought the stars up close would look like fireworks, a spray of light and life, you know. Peter nosed the sleeve of Clint's t-shirt, but they didn't. They just looked like eyes or portals, kind of. Like I was being watched and yet still alone. always alone. His ear coloured in red splashes. Sorry, it's stupid. Clint thumbed Peter's side. Thankfully the night was warm and kind to their bare forearms, and yet a little shiver still ran through Peter after he said the words. Doctor Strange told the Corps Avengers the story at the Lake House Memorial, how Peter barely survived his trip to space thanks to oxygen deprivation and snuck on board the Flying Donut, all because he refused to leave Tony. Clint's tongue unstuck from the roof of his mouth before he even thought about it. The snow smelled different on my trip to space. Peter's lashes flipped up. Clint kissed the tip of his crimson ear. Couldn't believe how normal it was, stepping off the ship to see a snowstorm on Vormir. Normal as a postcard. But it didn't. It didn't smell like the snow we get here on the farm. Not even the dirty snow in New York. Not enough moisture or crystals in it, I think. It smelled like lightning. Clint peered down at him. Yeah, like residual ozone after a lightning strike, or that tangy taste when you accidentally bite down on your tongue. Or ash. Clint hid the blip in his pulse with a sigh. That Red Skull guy really did kind of smell like ash, I suppose. Peter hummed. Clint felt its tiny vibrations against his breastbone and hiked up his arms so they were around Peter's chest instead. Peter's hands went with the motion, head tucked into the crook of Clint's elbow now. Such a small kid, carrying such hefty memories. Is that why you came out here? Clint asked softly, overwhelmed, thinking about what happened the day Thanos snapped. Wouldn't be the first time the kid had been blindsided by traumatic memories on a mundane day. Clint had found him crying in his room not 2 days ago. Peter shook his head, tickling Clint's cheek. The opposite. Cooper and I are designing a new character for his college portfolio. A creepy thing. Michelle would love it. Another mental note slipped into Clint's docket, another name for Maria to investigate. He didn't remember Peter mentioning any Michelle during those 2 weeks they stayed together at the lake house. And then we somehow got laughing about a movie that had wolves in it. So hard the fizzy water almost went up my nose. Cooper kept trying to make it better by saying the bad CGI wolves weren't that bad, but it only made me giggle more. Peter's eyes at last flicked down, away from all those light years between him and the day he dusted, landing on Clint's arms. He traced the violent tattoo outlines. I kept savouring the moment, desperate to remember it. The feel of warmth, safety, the way Cooper's eyes fan when he laughs like yours. But then I realised. Clint waited until Peter's index finger came to rest over his pulse point. Realised what? That there will be a bunch of those moments to come. I don't have to hoard the warmth before everything good goes away. It's not the last memory I'll ever make with Cooper or you guys. It's the start. I'm going to have more happy memories. Lots of them. The stars seemed to flare brighter all of a sudden, suffused until they bled together. But then, maybe that was just Clint's shiny eyes. He brushed back Peter's hair, the same stray curl that never stayed in place, even for Tony's memorial, no matter how much May gelled it. Boisterous and alive and golden, just like Peter himself. Good things never stuck around for me growing up, Clint confessed it in a murmur. Peter mirrored the tone. Me either. I never get to keep the good things. But this is going to last, isn't it? Yeah, baby. Clint tightened his hold. This is going to last. I know adults in your life really stay, so I won't make empty promises that don't mean anything to you. But every breath in my body is aimed at ensuring both me and Laura and my kids stick together, healthy and whole for many years to come. No more fighting, no more risk-taking. I'll be indefinite like that dumb mobile. Peter's grin spanned to the other side of his face, and the bulbs of his cheeks flushed. And now, kids includes you. Clint bumped Peter's head with his nose. You're my kid, Pete. Have been for longer than I ever realized. Peter fell quiet, but that was okay, especially since he was smiling so wide his eyes wrinkled at the edges. The scent of apple blossoms floated on the breeze, white and pink petals littering their porch from the orchard upwind, along with the lavender and honeysuckle from Laura's garden below. Through the open bathroom window farther down, Clint heard Lila brushing her teeth. Fireflies danced in the grass, yards upon yards of grass twinkling in an auburn reflection of the sky above. The trees sighed under a swell of gentle wind, their final cadence for the day. Peter's heart beat against Clint's chest through his shoulder blades. The loneliness of his life before Peter came along struck Clint, that he had someone to talk to now who had been through the same thing, had been to space, had lost Tony, had faced Thanos head-on and come home from the war different version of himself. The sheer wonder of it plumed through Clint, choking his breath and releasing that coil inside his gut. The tether melted away altogether. Love suffused every last capillary in Clint's body, so that he could only cradle Peter close and plant a teary kiss on his cheekbone. Peter touched the wet spot on his face when Clint pulled back. Clint watched the cycle of his emotions, from happiness to perplexed awe to grief to determination, settling on a similar, shyer kind of joy that must be beaming from Clint's own face. "Hey, Clint?" "Yeah." Peter intertwined their fingers, one hand full of Tony's memory, the other a very alive Clint. "That day, with the birthday cupcake, I wished for this." Fireflies swirled up, aglow with the thrill of life ahead. So was Clint. He squeezed Peter's hand. Together they watched the world fall asleep, the peace of it a balm across their past fears. Peter hummed along with Laura where she puttered around the master bedroom. "I got what I wanted most." Clint closed his eyes and thanked whoever was listening for the sequence of events. Becoming an agent, then an Avenger, stopping the Accords, traveling through time, losing himself only to find it again when he found a skinny kid in the woods. For how they led him straight to this one moment on top of a farmhouse roof, hopeful about the future. He nodded against Peter's messy hair. So did I. Clint kissed his wife one last time and closed his eyes. Crickets chirped outside their open window, and across the hall Peter shuffled to bed after a trip to the bathroom. Nate's snuffly snores were just audible if Clint strained his good ear. The rhythm of the house pleated around him like the blanket over their bodies. Everyone safe and exactly where they should be. He reached up to his ear. For the first time in 5.5 months, Clint removed the hearing aid to set it on the bedside table. It was the best sleep he'd had all year.